Alright guys, we're going to do something a little bit different this week in lieu of the normal Meta Mondays. So, because we have a brand new expansion upon us, the Rising Tides expansion, we have basically sat down all day. I did like a 10 or 11 hour stream over on, twitch.tv/swimstream. Check me out, we do streams daily. And basically, we sat down and we theory crafted and we built 15 decks, 15 brand new decks for the new patch. Now, almost all of these are completely new concepts, but like nothing we've really seen before. Some of these are going to be kind of like updated versions of old concepts. So this video is going to be breaking down 15 new decks for the new patch. We have managed to use every single new champion at least once, and to like what I would consider, at least in this like theory craft stage, to the best of their abilities. I feel very, very comfortable with how these lists have been constructed. Most of them I've spent like almost an hour on each, just kind of like theorizing and making sure each quantity of each card was exactly right. It goes without saying that, as always, the pinned comment is going to have a link to the site where you can take any of these decks if you want to use them yourself. Now, without tiering, I do have like question mark tier on all of them. It's going to be very, very difficult to predict the new meta, but as a vague reference point, I have tried to put stronger concepts near the top, which we'll be starting with. So we're going to kind of do this speedrun mode. New Karma Ezreal, I think, is going to be an extremely powerful deck. This should come to nobody's surprise. I expect this deck to actually get nerfed within, it'll probably get nerfed in about exactly 2 weeks after this update in some way. But overall, the addition of Concussive Palm, Eye of the Dragon, and Deep Meditation to this archetype are all extremely, extremely powerful and allow this deck to play a lot more for the early game and slowing it down than it was in the past. Gotcha is a slot in. We're trying over Get Excited. It's probably going to be alright. Okay, next up we've got Bilgewater Elusives. Basically, the idea behind this deck is Bilgewater have a few powerful elusive cards. For example, Zep, Sprayfin, and Slippery Wave Rider, that allows them to sort of complement the Ionia package in terms of their own elusive strategy. There hasn't really been a second elusive color. PNZ doesn't really have a lot until Bilgewater came along. We can add to that Citrus Courier, which is a very, very powerful rally ability that should be able to close out games very, very reliably off of, the open attack. You will be able to get like a double elusive attack pretty often on turn 6 or 7 that will be straight up winning you the game with this deck. Next up is a concept that I've been actually messing around with for a while, which is the idea of a slow play burn strategy, not necessarily super aggressive, but we're going to be burning the opponent down, and often this is going to go pretty fast, but we have a bit more flexibility. I can use my removal as a stabilizer tool in aggressive matchups. Swain fits into the strategy fairly perfectly. He will be able to come down on 5 as a pretty massive threat, and usually the level up condition is going to be one of the easiest to hit in this deck. I expect this to be a very, very powerful deck, probably the most competitive way, in my opinion, currently to use Swain. Then we've got Milkai, or Mil Maokai. So when the opponent tries to draw when they have 0 cards in their deck, they immediately lose the game, which means Maokai's level condition of forcing the opponent's deck into being 4 cards means they'll lose the game very quickly after that has happened. So when we toss a lot, when we kill a lot of our own units, and when we start drawing from the opponent's deck after Maokai comes down with his flip, we are going to be ending the game actually pretty quickly with this Mil condition. I think that a lot of people see Mil as like, the immediate reaction to Mil or Maokai is like kind of like a bit of a joke, like a meme alt win con. I actually think this is going to be fairly competitive when you are drawing off the top of your opponent's deck with Black Market Merchant, as well as Pilfered Goods. You're basically making them lose the game faster if you use these cards after the Mil or Maokai flips, right? Same with Yordle Grifter. So if possible, try to save them for after the Milkai flips, okay? Then we've got Sea Monsters, which is actually going to look like a bit of a similar deck. We are running some of the same cards, but overall this is going to play very, very differently. The most important component in this deck is we have Zap, Sprayfin, and because Lure of the Depths is our only 3 or lower mana card, Zap will always draw us Lure of the Depths, and this is the power card in Sea Monsters. We will be on average drawing 2 Lure of the Depths per game because Zap will allow us to draw into it so reliably, which means cards like Terror of the Tides will be 6 mana, will be drawing a lot of sea monsters and playing them over and over again. We're running 2 Nautilus, which honestly, he's alright in this deck. I think a refined version might actually like cut Nautilus for some other kinds of cards, but he ends up being alright, and honestly I got peer pressured into it by chat. The one I've released, because a lot of people are asking, is just because you want to play for a bit of potential in the early game. You don't want to be like, you know, dying right away. You need some board presence, and Maokai helps the idea of kind of like a deep sea monster deck very well. You know, we have to be in Shadow Isles because of Terror of the Tides, and what Maokai allows us to do, stall the game out a little bit, but he gets us closer to our deep level up as well. Then we've got our Twisted Fate Lee Sin deck, which is actually a really cool combo. Out of all the decks we made today, this is maybe my favorite. It took me a while to think of like the best way to use Twisted Fate, and I came to the conclusion that when you combine him with Lee Sin deck, or at least like a lot of the Lee Sin component cards, those being like, you know, Eye of the Dragon, Concussive Palm, Deep Meditation, we're going to be able to slow the game down reliably, as well as like help get to a win condition. Lee Sin provides a good alternate win condition. Twisted Fate isn't going to be leveling up in like most of your games probably. When it happens, it's going to be very powerful. And when you can use Jeweled Protector on Twisted Fate, that's really, really powerful because it helps him be much more survivable, as well as a 5/5 quick attack threat that can start actually, you know, putting some presence on the board. Then we've got new Elusive OTK. So now I know a lot of you guys hate me for publishing this list in the first place, but, you know, I mean, there's many people who were able to get to Masters with it, and there's a lot of people that might be looking for the new version of this deck. Overall, adding in some Scouts and adding in Ghost to be able to like capitalize on the Elusive Scout for that round is going to be pretty powerful, and we have some newfound Ionia reliability tools in the form of Deep Meditation. Then the classic burn discard aggro. So this is a much more aggressive version of kind of like the Swain style list we saw above. We're using Draven, we're using Jinx, and we're going to be just basically plowing ass nice and early. Much more like 1-drops in this style of deck. We're not really trying to play for a semi-reactive option. This is a pretty powerful deck. You'll get a lot of wins nice and early. It's a great anti-fun deck. If you want to come out on ladder day 1, everyone's messing around with, you know, all their cool new concepts, all their fun new ideas, leveling their champions left and right. You come out with a deck like this and just basically end games on turn 5 or 6, not let anyone have any fun. It's a great no fun allowed deck. Our best Vi deck is Lee Sin Vi, which is the idea of basically a very tempo-driven, sort of like spell-heavy deck, where we actually managed to fit in Plaza Guardian as well. I think Plaza Guardian has been a card that has been like pretty weak for a while, and it's like this card has a really big tipping point where just like a couple of extra spells, spam survivability, will actually make him come down at a really relevant point in the game to be closing it out, and we'll have to see if this patch gives him quite that edge he needs. But for now, I'm liking him here. So, of course, we've got Vi, who, you know, grows every time you play a card in hand. You've got Lee Sin, who you want to play a lot of spells. So we just spam a bunch of very, very cheap spells. We're using very tempo-driven cards like Claws of the Dragon. We're going to be playing Mushrooms from hand direct from Chump Womp, Flash of Brilliance. All of this is going to be boosting our Vi, leveling our Lee Sin, and discounting our Plaza Guardian all at once. In addition to that, it will also be potentially getting us Dragonlings off of the Eye of the Dragon, as well as cheapening our Deep Meditation. So you're going to be ending games fairly quickly. It's not like a super aggressive deck. It doesn't necessarily go straight for face. You do run some control cards a bit, but it's a very, very tempo-driven deck that will be kind of smashing games out on kind of like the medium range turns, like 6 to 8 maybe. Now this is a little gem of mine, a bit of a personal favorite actually, which is aggro Nox builds. Now we're not kind of going for any kind of like particular obvious build around synergy here or anything, but I really wanted to make Auroch Glintthorn a better card, and there's many ways of using this card for value. I think it's actually a pretty powerful card. In fact, it's straight up nuts if it can be enabled, and this is one deck that enables it. So we're going to use Twisted Fate largely for the red card in this deck. The red card will be damaging everything and enabling Auroch Glintthorn to be able to stun everything. The thing about Auroch is when this attack is declared, the stun happens. The opponent does not get a chance to respond. The opponent does not get a chance to block. It just happens, and it's very, very powerful for that reason, although hard to set up. So we take some aggro approaches. We're going to be using a very, very interesting card you might notice is Reckless Trifarian. This card has been deemed weak in the past, and rightfully so, but it makes a lot of sense in this style of deck, because it will be able to connect a lot more hits with stuns. It'll be able to kind of like redouble in effectiveness with the Plunder from Citrus Courier, and it will be a really, really good kill card for golden narwhals for the opponent, as well as whatever you're hitting with hired gun. Basically, the vulnerable tag makes this card a lot better, and you will do a great job at cleaning up the narwhals. We're also running Hunting Fleet, which summons the 2/4 golden narwhal that's vulnerable. That's the downside, but this is a deck that can actually use this card pretty well. It does not look like a super strong card in general, this Hunting Fleet card, but I think like this is a perfect deck to find value out of it. The 7/7 style line is actually going to be able to close out games very, very well with your Auroch and your Citrus Courier, allowing it to either double up or get through blockers. Then, you know, we at a later point of the day got enough requests in chat that I actually caved in and built a Yasuo deck just because everyone seems to want it. Yasuo is a very interesting archetype to try to perfect. This one's going to be really hard to refine without getting to play it out a bunch and like getting to feel out what the meta is and whether you want to play a little slower or whether you want to play a little faster. But I think one of the keys to this deck is finding a way to try to hit Auroch Lanthorn value. Now, I was thinking about like 1 or 2 Death Lotuses can actually sometimes help you hit that value just because there's not really big other options here, but oftentimes you will have a little bit of value on these stuns just from the opponents, you know, randomly having taken damage from combat, like when you chump block with your weak cards like Shadow Assassin. Usually it'll lead to something being damaged. Katarina's Blade's Edge will damage off enemies, and you've got draws into Death Lotus off of stuff like Deep Meditation. So ultimately, I think that this deck might be able to use Auroch pretty well, although a traditional full control Yasuo would stick with the old Minotaur Reckoner. Ultimately, this one plays a lot more for tempo and flexibility. We've got, you know, of course, the Eye of the Dragon. By the way, this card is absolutely insane. Eye of the Dragon and Deep Meditation and Concussive Balm, all 3 of these cards are absolutely ridiculous cards that Ionia got. Expect to see these in a lot of decks. All right, and yeah, that's part of the reason why Yasuo feels a lot better now, because of course Concussive Palm and even Eye of the Dragon work pretty well with his playstyle. Then for our Sejuani deck, we've combined Sejuani with Misfortune here and basically made a all-in Plunder deck. So the idea here is we are triggering a lot of Plunder abilities. We're trying to be leveling up Sejuani pretty much as fast as possible, although we might skip some turns. We're combining Ruthless Raider, which is going to allow some level up hits for sure, as well as Ember Maiden, which is a general value slow play card that will actually combine well with Ruthless Raider since it allows you to develop the board without hurting your own unit. And of course, all of the Plunder cards. Ember Maiden is going to be triggering Plunder effects, and we've got pretty much everything that's going to be feeding off of the Plunders, as well as ways of enabling those Plunders. So we've got, you know, Shared Spoils, we've got Tusk Raider, Wolf Rider, and you can play it sometimes kind of like a ramp deck depending on your opening hand, because of course when you hit Tusk Raider nice and early or Sejuani nice and early with a flip, you're going to be closing the game out. Here, interestingly enough, we have Yordle Grisver. Even though the Allegiance odds aren't amazing, this card is actually so ridiculously good that oftentimes just running it for like a free body plus warning shot plus the ability to have, you know, the option for drawing into an Allegiance on 50/50 is perfectly acceptable. For Gangplank, we've done a bit of like a committal keg package burn deck. We're not running the spell that summons 2 kegs because I think that's a bit too much of a commitment, and kegs have pretty steep diminishing returns, but we are using our kegs to enable a bit more of a controlling strategy here. So we're trying to use kegs with cards like Static Shock, cards like Make It Rain, to slow the game down and kind of get a bit more of like an actual slow burn. This one doesn't really have as much aggro potential. If anything, it's probably the slowest of the 3 burn options. It ends up being a bit of a control deck with a lot of the overtop potential of stuff like Double Up and stuff like Gangplank. But Twisted Fate's red card is another really, really good use of the keg pop as well. So it ends up being very, very good in a keg style deck. And then finally, there's this Quinn deck. This one's okay. It's like, okay, look, I had to do it all day. I was struggling for a way to make quiz because I wanted to get every single champion Quinn, she's not necessarily great. This is like, it's an alright deck. We're using like, you know, she'll level up sometimes, and I don't think this champion's super good, I'm not gonna lie. But I needed to appease the Quinn mains out there, so this is a good way to run the all-in Quinn deck. Reasonably speaking, you'd probably be a little bit better off if you weren't going for the level up conditions on both Quinn and Misfortune, but this is kind of like the rally, scout, level these cards up deck. Not only is it a Quinn deck, but we're going to be kind of leveling up Misfortune as aggressively as possible with this style of deck. And of course, we do have power finishers with Citrus Courier and Cytherea the Bold. It's not necessarily a terrible deck, but it's definitely going to be, you know, the runt of the litter, as it were. And that's pretty much it. Those are going to be the decks. Oh wait, there's actually one more. Poro Twisted Fate. Oh god. Okay, so this is like this. Okay, look, I have a very, very specific Keck W section on my website. This is not a deck I would necessarily. It's a meme deck. Let me just make that clear. So this, because we have this new card, Aurora Borealis, this is actually not a terrible card. It does enable the Poro synergy a decent amount. So what we've done is we've combined this with a lot of the Bilgewater package. We use Zap Sprayfin to reliably draw Poro Snacks. It will always draw us Poro Snacks in this deck, so we can get more Poro Snacks. We've got Plunder Poro, as well as many of the other Plunder synergy cards, Jagged Taskmaster and Cutthroat to enable them both. And Twisted Fate is just going to be helping us either draw cards, stall the game out, or potentially level up, because as it turns out, the best way to run Poros is to run a lot of card draw, because they just want more of their own like synergy pieces, and you can't really put more Poros in the deck. So that's it. If you're interested in a more meme approach, if you just wanted to find a way to make Poros viable, this is actually not, honestly, this might actually be better than the Quinn deck. It's not. This one's not bad. Like, listen, it's Poros. Like, don't expect much, but it's not bad. And that's it. These are 15 decks for day one of launch of, you know, the new Rising Tides expansion. I think these are pretty well refined. Obviously, there's limits to refining a deck before the expansion, because we need to know what the meta is, to know kind of what the best counters are, that kind of thing. So ultimately, these are decks that I can recommend to anyone. If you're going to take any of these decks, I'd highly recommend making sure you are like refreshing the page and like checking back, because I do keep all of these as updated as possible, right? I'm always updating these every time I make a slight change to the deck, which is quite often. So there's obviously going to be a lot more decks we're going to play around with. These are just the 15 that we have thrown together in the past 10 hours. I'm going to be playing with a ton of crazy concept all week. I expect to do like 10+ hour streams. Yeah, basically all week. It's going to be a very, very exciting time. I'll see you guys next time.